What's going on, guys? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. This is pros and cons for the BLU V91. In this video, I'm going to be going over some of the strengths and weaknesses of this phone to help you decide whether or not it's the right one for you. Before we get into it, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It does help out the channel a lot. That being said, let's get started. So my first pro for this phone is the storage. This phone has 128 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so that's actually quite a bit. For an entry-level phone like this, you're not going to get any higher. The only higher you can even go at all is maybe 256 or 512 with one of the super high-end phones like the Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra or the iPhone 12 Pro Max, something like that. That's really the only way you're gonna get more storage than this. And in this price range, very few phones actually have 128 gigabytes. Usually for entry-level phones, 64 is even high, and I've seen plenty of phones in this exact price range that have as little as 32. So with 128 gigabytes, for this price range, you're getting a great deal. For the average user, you're not even gonna come close to running out of storage. You're probably never gonna even have to think about it. And if you're more of a power user with lots of different apps and lots of photos and videos and that sort of thing, you're still gonna be perfectly fine. You can always put your photos and videos on a micro SD card, and all the apps can go on the actual phone storage itself, and then you'll have plenty of space to work with. Even if you don't think you're going to need this kind of storage, these days apps and the system are all getting bigger and bigger, so it's a good idea to have more than you think you need. The second pro for this phone is the materials. Despite being an entry-level phone, this phone is made of some real solid materials, and the design overall is really nice. When you hold this phone, you'll notice that it has some good weight to it. And usually phones in this price range are made of cheap plastic that feel so light they almost seem hollow. But with this phone, it is really solid. The back is made of a really hard material that has real good quality to it as well. And it also doesn't pick up fingerprints, which is another real nice thing about it. Overall, I would say the materials for this phone are really high quality, more so than even some phones that are a lot more expensive than it. My next pro for this phone is the camera setup. On the front here, we have a hole punch camera that's 16 megapixels, and this camera looks real nice. With the hole punch design, it really has a clean, modern look that goes with the rest of the phone really well. The phone already has thin bezels, so having a hole punch front-facing camera instead of a water drop notch that protrudes from the bezel at the top really makes the phone look just that much nicer. And then we got a quad camera setup on the back with a 16 megapixel rear camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode. So as far as features go, this phone is great for that too. Whether you're a more casual user of the camera who likes to take a nice photo here and there, maybe you use simple features like portrait mode, or you're a more frequent user who likes the advanced features like the macro camera or the ultra wide camera, this phone's camera setup is going to have a little something for everybody. So regardless of your situation, you're most likely going to be happy with this setup. My next pro for this phone is the large display. This phone has a 6.5-inch display, making it definitely on the larger side. Now, by today's standards, it's not huge. There are tons of phones out there that have larger displays than this one, but at the same time, it's still objectively a large display, and it really gives you the benefits of having a bigger phone. So when you're consuming content, whether that's video streaming, viewing photos, even reading, everything's going to show up larger on it, of course, than it would on a smaller phone. But at the same time, this display isn't so large that it's uncomfortable to hold in your hand or carry in your pocket. So you get pretty much the best of both worlds. Now my final pro for this phone is the battery. This phone has a 5000 milliamp hour battery that supports 10 watt fast charging. Now this battery is really good. It's going to give you a lot of life throughout the day. Depending on how you're using the phone, you might not even have to charge the phone during the day. And even if you do, the 10 watt fast charging is going to ensure that you can charge it a lot more in a shorter period of time, so you won't have to wait too long to give it some extra life when you need to. The other cool thing about having a large battery like this is that when it starts to degrade, you won't notice it nearly as quickly as you would with a smaller battery. So that means that you're going to be able to go a lot longer with this phone before you actually have to replace it than you would with a phone that has a smaller battery. So if you like to keep the same phone for a long period of time without having to replace it, having a large battery like this is going to benefit you a lot. Now my first con for this phone is the processor. This phone is getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek MT6 762V processor. I ran a Geekbench 5 benchmark test on this phone and it came back with a single core score of 139 and a multi-core score of 856. So while this processor isn't really that bad in and of itself, there are plenty of phones out there in this price range that have a lot more processing power than this. So if processing power is a priority for you, then you can do a lot better. But if it's not, if you're really only going to be using this phone for basic activities like sending text messages, maybe some light web browsing and social media use, then it's going to be completely fine. I've had no performance issues with the phone, but again, if processing power is really important to you and you want to have a really fast phone, you can do better than this even in this price range. My next con for this phone is the software. This phone runs on Android 10 and you're not going to be able to update it either. So you're stuck with Android 10 even in 2021. Now, if you don't really care about the software, this isn't really going to be a big deal for you. But if you like to get the latest version of Android as it comes out, this is probably going to be a huge drawback, if not a deal breaker for you, because this phone is going to be at Android 10 for its entire lifetime. But on the other hand, there are plenty of phones out there in this price range that have Android 11 and some that even support updates frequently. So if software is really important for you, if you want to get that edge panel and all that, you're probably going to want to look at a different device. My next con for this phone is the 720p display. Now this is more of a con, honestly, that's a little nitpicky and it's a little bit more out there, but I do think that because of how nice this phone already is, all of its features and everything included, as well as the size of the display, I do think it would have been a lot better if this display was in 1080p instead of 720p. Now, it's not very common for a phone in this price range to actually have 1080p, but I really do think manufacturers should start moving in that direction because pretty much all of the good upper mid-range phones have displays in 1080p and it's slowly starting to trickle down. So it's really only a matter of time before the entry level and lower end phones start to get 1080p displays as well. Nowadays, with flagship phones having displays of 1440p and higher, I really do think it's time to start upgrading the displays of the lower end phones too, because that does go a long way, especially on a phone like this that's in every other way optimized for content consumption. My next con for this phone is the quality of the video. Now this phone can shoot video in 1080p in both the rear and front facing cameras, which by the way is another reason why I really think that phones like this should be getting 1080p displays, because you can't view those videos in 1080p even though you're shooting them in that resolution, and to me I think that's really annoying. But that aside, that is the max resolution this phone can shoot videos in, and I honestly don't think the video quality is very good. First of all, the audio quality is pretty much terrible. If you're trying to shoot a video on this phone with good audio that you want to post on something like Instagram or YouTube or pretty much any platform where you're going to keep the video up, then you're going to have to get an external microphone or something like that just to make up for how bad the microphone of this phone really is when it comes to shooting videos. Now, if you're using something like Snapchat where the video is just gonna go away anyway, I could see getting away with it, but in general, the quality of videos shot on this phone is pretty disappointing. My fifth and final con for this phone is there's no dual app feature. In case you don't know, the dual app feature is a feature commonly found in Samsung and Motorola phones of all levels that allows you to download an extra copy of an app, like for example, Snapchat, Facebook, that kind of thing, so you can log into 2 accounts at once. Now, since that's a feature that so many other Android phones have, and this phone already has a lot of nice features to begin with, I would think that that's something this phone would have as well. but unfortunately it doesn't. Now if it does and I'm just missing it, definitely let me know in the comments, but I did look everywhere on this phone and I couldn't find it, and that is a bit of a disappointment because that feature is really popular and really useful if you have anything with multiple accounts. But those were my pros and cons for the BLU V91. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you want to learn more about the phone itself, be sure to check out my full review of the device on the channel. And if you happen to be watching this video after you bought the phone, you can always check out my beginner's guide and my tips and tricks video for the phone, so you can get some information on other features you can find on this phone that you're going to want to know about when you're setting it up for the first time. But that's it for today. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you in the next video.